Hello guys, and welcome to my video on how to build a stamina Nightblade. So, just like the other ones that we've done on how to builds, guys, we're going to be talking about the stamina Nightblade in this one. We're going to be looking at all the different Nightblade skills that affect stamina Nightblade from their class tree. We're also going to be taking a look at the passives from the stamina Nightblade and how that kind of will affect you. And we're also going to take a look at a few other things. Talk about the race choices for Stamblade. We're going to talk about different kinds of gear sets, different kinds of build approaches, etc. So this is a great video if you guys are a little bit newer to buildcraft. So let's begin. Let's jump right into it. So let's start off in our first tree here, the Assassination tree, guys. So this is a really powerful tree for the Stamina Nightblade. You're going to have a lot of really strong offensive style abilities coming out of this tree. So let's get into it. We're going to start at the first ability here. We've got Killer's Blade. This is, of course, the stamina morph of this ability, and this is your execute here for the Stamblade. It has a fairly decent amount of base damage for the tooltip. It's not so bad. 300% bonus damage to a target below 25% health. You also heal for 21% of your max health if the target dies within 2 seconds when you use this ability. This is a really good execute, in my opinion, for one simple reason. It has a very low threshold, which isn't necessarily a really good thing, but the low threshold is nice because if someone drops below that 25% threshold, chances are if you use this execute on them, they are going to die from it. Now, that being said, you've got to really be quick with this execute. You've got to keep your eye on your opponent's health bar. It's going to be tough, especially in PvP, to land this execute on a player. If they're actively healing themselves, you want to make sure that you get them within that 25% window. There are other executes in the game that start to get their bonus damage at 50% or lower, so those ones are a little bit better for general execution, but if you want to make sure that you're going to drop the last 25% health of whatever you're attacking, Killer's Blade is probably the best execute in the game to do that with. So let's carry on, guys. The next ability we have here is Ambush. So this is, of course, the stamina morph of our Gap Closer. Let's take a look at what it does here. We've got a pretty decent amount of physical damage that it deals. It also grants you Empower, increasing the damage of your next attack by 20%. And if the target is a player, they are briefly snared instead of being stunned. So there you have it, guys. A little bit of a snare against a player will stun the mobs. Not so bad. This is a great Gap Closer. Something to keep in mind about this particular Gap Closer that it is a teleport, so that if you're immobilized, you can still use this Gap Closer to move around. You won't be stopped by the immobilization, whereas a Gap Closer like Critical Rush would. The damage on this Gap Closer is quite good. Of course, it gives you major Empower, increasing the damage of your next outgoing attack by quite a lot as well, so you can set up some really nasty combos with this Gap Closer here. My personal favorite is to have a bow and then either dual wield or two-handed, or maybe even sword and shield on the other swap, and then I'll do a bow heavy attack, weapon swap into the Gap Closer, and then I'm on my melee bar on top of the opponent, and I can start dropping combos on them. So I really like the Nightblade Gap Closer quite a lot. I think the teleport is quite unique. It's a very fast Gap Closer once you teleport to your target. It's a great way to really break line of sight. You can use this Gap Closer very well. And not to mention it hits quite hard too, so you can do quite a bit of damage with it. So there you have it, guys. A little fun fact about this Gap Closer too is that most Gap Closers will break you from stealth when you use them. This Gap Closer, however, will not break you from stealth, and you will get your stealth bonus when you do attack out of stealth with this Gap Closer also. The next ability we have down, guys, is Blur, morph to either Double Take or Mirage. So these are great abilities if you're not running a bow, especially. This is going to be an awesome way for you to get Major Expedition if you go for the Double Take morph here, which is going to give you that Major Expedition. Both of these morphs give you Major Evasion, and all that's going to do is increase your dodge chance by 15% for 26 seconds. So you have a 15% chance not to get hit by anything that is a single target attack or not an AoE, etc. So there you have it, guys. And then, of course, you can also go for the Mirage morph, which will give you both of your minor resistances. That's nice because we do know that Nightblade does easily come by both of their major and major ward and major resolve, so you can stack the minor resolves on as well using Mirage here. Okay, so let's take a look at the next ability down. We have Mark Target. morphed to either Reaper's Mark or Piercing Mark. So this is a great ability because it debuffs your opponent. Nightblade does have a lot of abilities that will give both Major Fracture and Major Breach. So they've got quite a few different abilities and access to quite a few different skills that you can use to debuff the armor of your opponent. So this is one of many. So that's just kind of what it does. The mark itself, when you put it on a target, if you kill them, you heal for a % of your max health. It's 42% for the normal marks. And then, of course, if we do Reaper's Mark, you heal a bonus amount of damage, and you gain Major Berserk if you kill your opponent for 5 seconds. This is, Major Berserk's a very powerful buff, and there's not very many ways in the game to get it. So this is one of the cool ways in the game to get the Major Berserk buff. Pairing this with sets like Heem Joss, maybe you'd be able to get 8 seconds of Major Berserk off of a kill. So you'd be able to have quite an interesting and high amount of Major Berserk uptime if you really took advantage of these marks. That being said, though, it would be an extra cast in between all of your abilities in order to keep that Major Berserk up. So there you have it. Not to mention, for PvP, in order for you to gain an advantage off of this, you would need to be getting kills back-to-back off of your mark. And then, of course, we have Piercing Mark, which will not give you the Major Berserk, but it will allow you to see an invisible target. Absolutely indispensable for a Nightblade. A big thing that you'll do playing Stamina or Magicka Nightblade is that you have access to Stealth, and that pretty much makes you the king of the Stealth War. So if you want to play the Stealth War right, you need to have something to effectively pull an opponent out of Stealth as well. So this is an awesome ability to use on a target so they cannot re-enter Stealth once you have seen them and dropped the mark on them. Okay, and finally, the last ability we have in the Assassination Tree, guys, is Relentless Focus and Merciless Resolve. We're going to look at the Relentless Focus morph, of course, because Merciless Resolve is morphed to a magic damage ability, therefore not making it so great for a stand build. So we're going to focus on the Relentless Focus morph. The first thing that we're going to look at here is that we get Minor Berserk. So as a 20-second buff, we get Minor Berserk, and if on the Relentless Focus morph, we also get Minor Endurance. So 8% bonus damage and 10% bonus to our stamina recovery. While active, hitting an enemy with 4 light attacks or heavy attacks changes this ability into Assassin's Scourge, which allows you to fire a single shot from a spectral bow, dealing almost 11k disease damage. So let's compare this damage here to maybe our ultimate on the tooltip here. We see that this actually has a higher tooltip damage than the Nightblade Incapacitating Strike ultimate. So this is essentially your most powerful single target ability on your Nightblade. The only thing is that you can only activate it by using this ability and then weaving in 4 light or heavy attacks before this ability expires. So as you can imagine, if you learn your animation canceling well and your weaves are good, you should be able to shoot the Spectral Bow off quite often. This is a really great ability for Nightblade. Number 1, it's quite cheap. Number 2, it's an awesome buff. We get Minor Berserk, one of the most important damage buffs in the game for any damage dealing build. And then, of course, Minor Endurance, not really a huge deal, but Minor Endurance is a buff that's trickier to come by, so it is nice that we get that for our Nightblade as well. And then, of course, the bow. So there you have it, guys. Absolutely amazing Nightblade skill. I would really recommend this ability for any damage Nightblade, just for that Minor Berserk buff, in all honesty. The Minor Berserk is a huge difference. It is one of the greatest offensive buffs in the game. And if you are playing an offensive build and you really feel like you're lacking damage, one of, if not the best way to increase that outgoing damage is to get that Minor Berserk buff on your build. So there you have it, guys. Absolutely recommend this ability for Nightblade. And let's take a look at the ultimate for the Assassination Tree. We have got Incapacitating Strike. This is going to deal a flat amount of damage, very high damage here, almost a 10k tooltip on this no 5-piece gear set that I'm running. I just have random gear on right now, sorry, just to make sure my character is wearing stuff. So quite a high tooltip on it. It'll also hit your opponent with Major Defile, reducing the amount of healing that they can receive by 30%. So absolutely incredible upfront damage, incredible Defile, and it'll stun your opponent once you use it on them as well. When we go for the in-cap morph. So we've got 2 different morphs here. One, of course, is magic damage and one is disease. You could go for Soul Harvest for the bonus alt gain, but ultimately for a stand build, I would recommend Incapacitating Strike simply because you will hit much harder with it due to it being disease damage. So there you have it, guys. Not only that, but this ability is going to increase your damage against your target by an additional 20% for 6 seconds. Now, this is not the Major Empower buff. This is a separate 20% increased damage buff that Nightblade will get when they use this ultimate on a target. So that's something to keep in mind here, is that you can stack this 20% buff with things like Empower to have your abilities hit for 40% more against the target. So this is a very, very powerful ultimate. Very cheap as well. It's coming in at a cost of 70 ultimate. Not bad at all, guys. So let's move on to the passives. We've got in our first tree here, Master Assassin. Increase your weapon and spell damage by 10% while you're sneaking and invisible. Increase the duration of your stun from sneak by 100%. 10% bonus weapon damage from stealth. Absolutely fantastic for a Stamblade. Stamblade is actually the best ganking spec in the game. I'm sure you guys know that. If you've played a little bit of ESO, especially in PvP, you will know that Stamina Nightblade can gank really hard. This, of course, is a part of it. They get that bonus damage, weapon damage, and spell damage from stealth. Increase the duration of the stun from sneak by 100%. That's great, too, for ganks. Get double duration on your gank stun. Of course, though, if you are attacking a player, their response time is up to them. So this doesn't really come into too much of effect unless your target is unable to break the CC. Okay, the next ability down, Executioner. You restore 1876 magicka over 6 seconds when you kill an enemy with an assassination ability. Now, this can kind of be useful if you get the kill with either your ult, your ambush, your killer's blade, or your incapacitating strike. We've got quite a few different offensive abilities here, and then of course, even if with your spectral bow, you'll be able to proc that passive, getting some magicka back. For the Stamina Nightblade, this isn't such a huge deal. It's great for a little bit of extra magicka recovery, which we can't be upset with, but for the most part, guys, it's not really a huge passive for Stamblade. Pressure points. Increase your weapon and spell critical ratings by 438 for each assassination ability slotted. Wow, that's pretty good. So that works out to be around 2 to 3% additional weapon and spell critical per assassination ability that we have slotted. We see that I have quite a few slotted here for a bonus of 13, 14, so almost a bonus of about 7 to 8%. To my critical. So not bad at all. This is a great ability for Magicka or Stamina Nightblade. Just slotting your assassination abilities on your bar is going to increase your outgoing crit rate. So having lots of assassination abilities on a heavier DPS bar is a great way to up that crit. And of course, if you want to play a higher crit Nightblade build, this is going to be a great passive to help you up that crit chance. So there you have it, guys. And then finally, our last passive here is Hemorrhage. With an assassination ability slotted, increase your critical damage by 10%. Dealing critical damage grants you and your group minor savagery, increasing your weapon critical rating by 657 for 20 seconds. So there we have it, playing right into the heavy crit amount on the Nightblade. We've got more critical coming in every time we land a critical hit off of this final passive here. And then, of course, with the assassination ability slotted, we get a 10% bonus to our critical damage. This is a huge amount. This is a really good passive ability. 10% is a lot of bonus damage, so there you have it. Absolutely fantastic passive to have. Very similar to the Templar Adric Spear passive, where they have a Adric Spear skill slotted, and they'll get the 10% crit bonus as well. So there you have it, guys. Assassination Tree, very powerful offensively. We've got some interesting offensive buffs and a couple defensive moves. So let's move on. This Shadow Tree. First ability here, we have Surprise Attack, which is the morph, the stamina morph of this ability. This is going to be your mainstay spammable for a Stamblade. Surprise Attack is one of, if not the most powerful single-target stamina spammable ability in the game. It hits so hard. Not only does it do more damage than most other single-target spammable stamina abilities, but on top of it, it is going to reduce your target's physical resistance by 5,280 for 17 seconds. That is a massive amount of time to debuff your opponent just for hitting them with a spammable attack. This is a very, very powerful, powerful ability, and I think something to kind of take into account with this ability on top of it is that applying that debuff is also going to be another negative effect that your opponent's going to have to remove. So especially for PvP, an ability like this, an offensive spammable ability that is always applying a debuff when you use it, is going to give your opponent more and more crap to purge off of themselves, effectively making it harder for them to deal with you. So there you have it, guys. This is by far mainstay spammable. Not only is it very powerful, but it is also very cheap. So very, very great Nightblade skill. there you have it. And then finally, if you attack someone with this ability from stealth, it will stun them for 4.6 seconds. So an awesome little bonus to that ability there, giving you the stealth stun out of your cloak or sneak. So let's move on. We've got Dark Cloak or Shadowy Disguise. This, of course, is your Nightblade Stealth, and we're going to take a look at both morphs here. One morph is going to give your next attack out of your cloak a guaranteed critical strike. This is awesome if you want to play Gank Blade. This is to make sure that you get that very heavy crit off of likely an opening heavy attack, etc. Whatever you're coming out of stealth with to hit your target, this is going to make sure that that lands a critical hit. Whereas Dark Cloak is kind of the defensive option to this ability. Both of them, of course, giving you the 2.9 seconds of invisibility, but Dark Cloak is going to give you minor protection, reducing your incoming damage that you take by 8% for 5 seconds. So they're two very different morphs. One is a very offensive kind of ganking cloak morph, and the other one is more of a defensively played morph. We also see that the Shadowy Disguise is just a little bit cheaper than Dark Cloak as well. So these are both great abilities, guys. It's really up to you which one you'd want to use. If you have a high crit rate already, I think Dark Cloak is the better bet, but if you're playing a gank build, I think that going for Shadowy Disguise is the better option, simply because you're always landing that crit out of your initial gank, and then I know you're guaranteed a critical hit on your first attack out of crouch, but this is a great ability because if you have to kill a second target and you can't get back into sneak, or your first target doesn't go down, this guarantees that after you use your cloak, you will be hitting a critical hit as well. So there you have it, guys. And then, guys, the next ability down is a Path of Darkness, morphed to either Twisting Path or Refreshing Path. Neither of these abilities are really great for Stamblade, because both morphs here, we're scaling off of Max Magicka. This is kind of an okay ability if you needed access to Major Expedition on your Stamblade. The only kind of downside to it is that it does not last for a long time, and it's quite costly on your Magicka. So for Stamblade, I would kind of avoid this ability in all honesty. The next ability down, guys, we have Aspect of Terror, morphed either to Mass Hysteria or Manifestation of Terror. So let's take a look at Mass Hysteria first. These are the Nightblade fears. So the Mass Hysteria is the fear that you've likely most seen out of the Nightblade if you've played a little bit of Nightblade or seen it before. And that's going to be the player-based fear. So they cast fear, and everyone around them is going to flee in fear for 4.5 seconds. This has a 6-meter radius. After the fear ends, their movement speed is reduced by 50%, and they are afflicted by minor maim, reducing their outgoing damage by 15% as well. So this is a very powerful stun, very powerful offensive and defensive stun for Nightblade, and not just that, but it's a very unique stun in the fact that it is one of the few stuns in the game that will drop a block of an opponent. So if you're in PvP and you're fighting an opponent who's holding block, fear will make them drop their block. They will not be able to block fear. So this is a very powerful stun for that simple reason, that it is able to go through block, and there's very few other things in the game that can go through blocks. So this is quite incredible for that reason alone. So there you have one option of this morph. Let's take a look at Manifestation of Terror. So what this is going to do is going to create 2 sinister traps. One is going to be at the targeted location, and the other one is going to be next to you, both of which will take 3 seconds to arm, and they'll last for 37.5 seconds. When an enemy walks over the trap and triggers it, a Dark Spirit is summoned to terrify up to 2 nearby enemies, causing them to flee in fear for 4 seconds. After the fear ends, they get the 50% movement speed snare as well. So this is kind of a different take on fear that's based more around laying traps on the ground. So for PvP in general, I think that the Mass Hysteria fear, the player-based one, is usually the better bet, simply because it's usually a better option to get players off of you, and as a Stamina Nightblade, the biggest issue that you'll often run into in PvP, especially if you're playing like a higher damage kind of ganky spec, is trying to get away from larger groups of other players. And Mass Hysteria is such a great stun. Not only will it stun 3 players, but it's a great ability simply because you can get them when they're on top of you with it. You don't really have to aim it. If you just get piled on by a bunch of guys, you can get them to run away by using this ability. Now, Manifestation of Terror is a really great ability. I've used it myself for a few different builds, but it works very differently. You can't use it as that kind of like defensive, get off me, get out, now everybody stun. It's more of like a trap that you'll set, and you can use it as a stun when the fight reaches a point when you need to use it, or you can set the trap and use it to control a zone or an area, etc. So that very much so changes how the function of this ability works, but it's still very cool. You can still do some cool stuff with it. Of course, mixing it with things like the shade is always a great option, but there you have it. So let's move on. The next ability that we have here, the final normal ability in the Shadow Tree, is Shadow Image or Dark Shades. So these are the two different morphs of this final ability here. Dark Shades is kind of playing off of the original ability here. It adds a second shade to fight by your side. Each shade, of course, will deal a little bit of magic damage and afflict the enemy with Minor Maim, reducing their damage down by 15% for 4 seconds. So we see Minor Maim coming up again here as another debuff that we'll be able to put on targets here. Very, very good to have lots of access to that ability, especially for a Nightblade, especially for a Stamblade. You know, there's a lot of abilities like buffs, debuffs, etc. And if you feel like you're taking too much damage, etc., maybe finding a way to apply more things like Minor Maim to your targets will help you out on the Nightblade. It'll make you feel a little tankier, because it will make a big difference in the end. So the first ability here will summon 2 shades, and they'll just kind of chase after the target you send them after. This is great because these shades count as pets, so they work with sets like the Hunt Leader from Maelstrom Arena, etc. So there you have it. The other morph of this ability is the ranged shade that has a bow. It does not do as much damage. It will, of course, apply Minor Maim as well to whatever it's attacking. But the added ability of this morph is that if you activate it again, you can teleport back to the original location of the shade as long as you didn't leave a 28-meter radius from that shade. So there you have it, guys. You got a choice between 2 summonable shades that just deal a little bit of outgoing damage and are going to spread Minor Maim around, or 1 summonable shade that you can teleport back to for free. I personally think that Shadow Image is the better morph here for general PvP combat. Just being able to jump around, being able to change your location like that, you can really throw off some players. A big issue with Cloak is that even if you go into stealth, people know you're still close by. So Shade's a great ability because you can just teleport the hell out of there, cloak up, and get away. So there you have it, guys. Both great for a Stamblade, depending on kind of what you're going for here. But I think for Stamblade in general, the Shadow Image is going to be a better option. So let's take a look at that ultimate that we've got here, guys, in our Shadow Tree. We've got Consuming Darkness. This is morphed to either Veil of Blades or Bolstering Darkness. So both of these abilities put a ring down that is going to give you major protection, reducing the damage that you and allies take if they're standing in this circle by 30%. Not only that, but any enemies that walk over the circle are going to take a 70% snare. So our Veil of Blades morph is going to add some damage to this ability. 2k damage every 1 second, granting you and your allies still the major protection. The damage is okay. It's a pretty lengthy ult. I mean, it lasts 16.1 seconds, so it's a great kind of hold your ground ult. It's not a super huge circle, but it is a very powerful ultimate in the fact that you do get major protection when you stand in it, and it's quite easy to tank this circle out. Most enemies don't want to stand in it because they do take that pretty strong dot from it as well. And then, of course, we also have the other morph here, which is going to be Bolstering Darkness. And what this one's going to do is reduce the damage that you take by an additional amount. So not only will you gain major protection, but only you will gain an additional reduction of 30% damage while you're in the circle as well. So while you're standing in your own circle of Bolstering Darkness, you'll have a 60% reduced incoming damage. This is a really awesome ability for like a tank Nightblade, simply because this is a 60% reduced incoming damage ult for 16 seconds. I mean, as a tank build, what more can you ask for? That's very, very powerful. Very, very, very powerful defensive ultimate, whereas the Veil of Blades puts an offensive spin on it. Of course, both of these morphs have the synergy of the Hidden Refresh. If an enemy is if an ally, is inside of your ultimate here, they can activate Hidden Refresh, which is going to give them a movement speed increase, heal them over time, and turn them invisible for 4 seconds. So very, very powerful synergy on this ultimate for your allies. This is not something that we see a lot of people run in PvP. I really don't see Veil of Blades that often, or Bolstering Darkness. I think the synergy is really cool. I think it could have a lot of application to group combat. If you had one Nightblade with a Veil of Blades, you could effectively stealth an entire team of players if you guys were well coordinated enough. So it's a very cool ultimate in that kind of sense. That being said, though, for general speaking, on a Stamblade, it's kind of great because you have a unique functioning ultimate that other stamina ultimates don't come close to. But if you were to play a Magblade, there are usually better magic alternatives like the Destro Staff ultimate to Veil of Blades. So there you have it. For Stamblade, I think Veil of Blades can be a really cool ultimate. For a tank Stamblade or any tank Nightblade in general, I think Bolstering can be really cool. But there you have it, guys. It is fairly limited as it does not do a ton of damage on the ultimate. So let's take a look at the passives that we have in this tree, guys. We've got Refreshing Shadows. This is going to give us a flat 15% increase to all of our recoveries, health, magicka, stamina. This is very Nightblade. Nightblade really plays off of stacking your recoveries. In this game, there is no class that benefits more from stacking recovery than a Nightblade. So if you want to build sustain on your Nightblade, stacking recoveries is one of, if not the best way to do it. We've got Shadow Barrier here. Casting a Shadow ability grants you Major Resolve and Major Ward for 4 seconds. This duration is increased by 25% for each piece of heavy armor you have equipped. So there you have it, guys. 4 seconds of your armor buffs if you use any of your Shadow abilities. We see that we have a spammable DPS ability, Dark Cloak, and Shade as all of our Shadow abilities here for Stamblade, and Fear as well. So you should have a very, very high uptime on your Major Resolve and Major Ward from your Shadow Barrier passive due to this kind of ability from Nightblade. Something to keep in mind about this is that due to this giving you both the armor buffs, this makes your cloak very powerful, as activating your cloak will give you both of the armor buffs and it will give you major protection if you go for the Dark Cloak morph. So a very tanky kind of option there playing into this, this Shadow tree. So let's take a look down here. Increase your max health by 3% for each Shadow ability slotted. Talking about tank Nightblades here, or just a Nightblade that needs more max health. Slotting more Shadow abilities is a great way to do that. And then finally, guys, Dark Veil. Increase the duration of your Shadow abilities by 15%. This is just playing off of any of the effects that your Shadow abilities do, be it armor debuffs, be it the fear duration, etc. This is going to give you a 15% flat increase on all of your Shadow abilities. So very, very good passive, kind of playing into how these abilities work. So there you have it, guys. Lots of very powerful buffs from the Shadow Tree. We see a very powerful spammable attack, and then of course some mobility, in CC and XP1 management abilities. Sorry, 1vx management abilities, I guess is what we'll call them. I'm outnumbered and I need some help. That's what our Shadow Tree is good at fixing. So let's take a look down at the Siphoning Tree, guys. This is kind of the Nightblade healing tree. So it's based very much so off of sapping health out of your targets. And other things like buffs, etc. So let's take a look at it. Let's start at the first ability here. We've got Strife, Swallow Soul, and Funnel Health. This is not an ability you're going to use for a Stamblade, as this is a purely magicka ability. So nothing we can do with that here. Same with Agony. Agony is not an ability that you'll use on a Stamplar for the most part. This can be a pretty decent stun for a Stamplar, as it is a long distance, or sorry, for a Stamblade, as it is a long distance stun. It does have a fairly hefty cost, but it's a long distance instant disorient, I guess. So you could essentially disable an opponent at a long distance instantly with this ability, which can come in very handy for a Stamblade if used right, but for the most part, this is not an attractive ability for Stamblade. We've got Cripple here, same deal, guys, very magicka-based ability. And then we've got Siphoning Attacks or Leeching Strikes. Now, how this ability works right now is getting changed in the upcoming Morrowind patch, guys. And due to this change seeming to be fairly locked down, I'm going to talk about how that ability works in the upcoming patch. So they're changing it so your light and heavy attacks will be the only thing that will return resources, and they will return health on the unmorphed version. And then when you morph this ability, one morph will return stamina, and one morph will return magicka, and they'll both retain returning health. So you'll return either health and magicka or health and stamina, depending on what morph you pick. And that's only on your light and heavy attacks, and will not have a chance to proc off of any of your other damaging attacks, like it says on Siphoning Attacks right now. So this turns this ability into essentially a sustain ability for either your magicka or your stamina. Whatever you think you need more of on your build or on your particular character, this is how you're going to get it. So if you're playing a Stamblade and you find you need more stamina recovery, pick the morph of this ability that gives you increased amount of stamina return. And if you're playing a Blade or Stamblade and you need more Magicka recovery for more cloaks, etc., which is totally understandable, then going for the other morph is also a great option if you feel like you need to add to that side of your sustain on your build. So what this essentially does is this will allow you to bulk up your sustain in whatever area you're kind of missing out on in the coming patch. And then finally, guys, the final ability we have in the siphoning tree is Power Extraction, the only stamina morph in our siphoning tree that we get. This is going to be on the AoE. This is going to give us access to Major Brutality, increasing our weapon damage by 20% for 20 seconds. So this is your Major Brutality buff on the Stamblade. It's also an AoE. This AoE is fairly comparable to the dual-wield Steel Tornado AoE. Steel Tornado, of course, is going to deal a little bit less upfront damage, but bonus damage when your opponent's health begins to drop below 50%. That one will be the better option. For the most part, I mean, it's not a bad AoE, guys. It has an 8-meter radius, which is quite large for a player-based AoE, so that's kind of great. The cost isn't super expensive, and then, of course, there's the Major Brutality buff. But otherwise, it's kind of lackluster. I mean, it's just an AoE, and that's pretty much it. This ability doesn't really give you much else. So there you have it, guys. Not really a super great ability for the Stamblade, unfortunately, here. So let's take a look at the ultimate ability that we've got. We've got Soul Tether or Soul Siphon. Two very different morphs of this ultimate. So let's talk about Soul Tether. This is going to deal a burst of AoE damage, a 6-meter radius around you, and it's going to deal quite a bit of damage to them. This is a magic damaged ultimate, so on a Stamblade you will not be able to take advantage of your champion points to the fullest if you're using this ultimate. The affected enemies will take 7k flat damage, they'll be stunned for 4.5 seconds, and they will have a 1,200 health steel dot on them that will tick every 1 second, healing you for the damage it does. So this can be a really great ultimate in a outnumbered situation because it will stun everyone around you, and then on top of it, it's going to heal you from the dot that it throws on everyone around you. And that healing can be quite powerful. If you hit 3 or 4 or 5 different targets with it, you'll find yourself sitting at probably around maximum health the whole time. So it's quite a powerful amount of healing you get from this ability, so it's very strong. And then we have the Soul Siphon morph, which is a very different kind of morph of this ability. This effectively turns this ultimate into just a healing alt. So this is going to sanctify the souls of nearby allies, healing them for 7.3k as a burst heal. It's got a 15-meter radius, so the radius isn't so bad. It's not that great either, though. If we compare this to other healing ultimates, like the one from the Templar one has longer duration. It's going to heal for probably more health, and it has a longer radius. But let's keep taking a look at this. They're going to get an additional 20k heal over the 3.5 seconds, and then finally they're going to receive Major Vitality, increasing their healing received by 30% for 4 seconds. So what makes this ultimate kind of attractive is that it is a very powerful burst healing ultimate. If you have a group of players around you and you use this ultimate, you're going to give them all Major Vitality and put a very powerful burst healing dot on them, as well as opening with that powerful burst heal to begin with. So this is a really great heal if you want to have a really strong AoE burst heal ultimate. Outside of that, guys, I just don't really see the usefulness of this ultimate. I mean, there are much better healing ultimates for other classes, in all honesty. This one is not bad. It's not bad at all, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't really hold a candle to, unfortunately, the other ultimates out there. So there you have it, guys. For Stamblade, I guess you could use Soul Siphon, but I would almost always pick Tether, personally. I just think, from the offensive point of view, it's just a much better ultimate. So let's take a look at the passives we've got here. Catalyst. After drinking a potion, you gain 20 ultimate. We have quite a few cheap ultimates for Nightblade, one of them being, of course, Incapacitating Strike. So Catalyst, very, very powerful passive, making sure we have quite a high amount of alts coming out of the Nightblade at all times. We've got Magicka Flood. Increase your max Magicka by 8% while you have a siphoning ability slotted. As we could see here, going through these siphoning abilities, they are mostly Magicka focused, and this passive, of course, is Magicka focused as well, so this will not have an effect on your your Stamblade, really. Increase your healing done by 3% for each siphoning ability slotted. This can have a big effect on Stamblade. That being said, there's only 3 different kind of siphoning abilities that you would be tempted to slot for a Stamblade. Siphoning attacks, the Drain, and of course the Ultimate. So the amount of bonus healing that you get is limited to the abilities that you'll put on your bar for it. Something to kind of keep in mind is if you did just want to have to slot abilities for like a passive healing bonus, slotting Swallowed Soul, which when morphed gives you minor vitality while slotted, is a great way to kind of do that. That'll play into this passive here. So just slotting that ability will give you a total of an 11% bonus to your healing. But of course, that ability doesn't have really much use for a Stamblade. So there you have it. And then transfer. Casting a siphoning ability generates 2 ultimate. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds. So there you see it again, guys. We don't really have any great spammables here, besides maybe the AoE for our siphoning tree. So that's kind of playing into the alt builds. So you could go for that route on the Stamblade. You could try it kind of like an alt build route. That being said, you don't really have a lot of ability options here. If you really wanted to do it, I would suggest mixing it with some of your weapon skill lines, things like low slash, morph to heroic slash, etc. So there we have it, guys. We have gone through the Nightblade class from a Stamblade perspective, talked about the abilities, kind of how they worked out. For weapons on the Stamblade, guys, I'd recommend two-handed, one-handed shield, dual wield, and bow. Stamblade's quite unique in that you can use dual wield, which is the highest dealing kind of melee get-up you can wear on your character, and you can still have a gap closer thanks to ambush. So you can build a very powerful dual wield Nightblade kit and still take advantage of all of your Nightblade skills while having the very powerful stats that dual wields gives you. Two-handed is a great option. You get a very powerful heal from two-handed. Rally, which is great for the Nightblade. I would recommend bow for Nightblade, definitely. I love bow on a Nightblade. I've played a lot of bow Nightblade builds. I've played a lot of Nightblade builds that use a bow as the offhand or main hand weapon as well. So bow on the Nightblade is absolutely fantastic also. And of course we are Stam builds, so stick away from the staves, guys. For armor, guys, I'd recommend light and medium armor for the Stamblade. A medium armor Stamblade is going to be a lot kitey. You're going to be playing a lot more like a fast-paced style, dodging incoming attacks, stealthing incoming attacks, etc. Whereas a heavy armor Stamblade, you're going to be playing a lot tankier of a build. You'll feel like you'll be able to take incoming damage. You'll be able to just out-heal some stuff instead of having to actively defend yourself using dodge roll, etc. and block, etc. So there you have it, guys. These are my 2 recommended armor slots for the Stamblade. Of course, leveling up that Fighter's Guild tree does not hurt. Fighter's Guild has access to some awesome stamina abilities for any stamina class, and then of course we have access to Flawless Dawnbreaker and Dawnbreaker of Smiting. Both great ultimates. One, of course, is going to give you a bonus to your weapon damage. The other one will deal a huge amount of damage. So I'd recommend getting those. For the Stamblade, we can play a fairly beefy max HP Stamblade. As we saw, looking over our Shadow passive, it is possible to stack a lot of HP on a Stamblade, so an ability out of your Undaunted like Bone Shield, which scales off your max health, could be really great if you wanted to play a max health Stamblade kind of build. So there you have it. Of course, something that we did talk about, guys, is that Stamblades have excellent regen, so Vampirism and Werewolf are also awesome for Stamblade. Vampirism is great. It'll give you a 10% bonus to both your Magicka Stamina Recovery. Werewolf will give you the 15% bonus if you have the right ultimate slotted. So there you have it, guys. For races for Stamblade, guys, I would recommend Redguard, Khajiit, Bosmer, Orc, and that's pretty much it. I mean, Nord's kind of a good option, and Imperial can kind of be a good option, but for the most part, they're better defensive options for a Stamina Nightblade than the other ones that I've mentioned there. Orc is going to be ultimately the hardest hitting all-around Stamblade. Bosmer and Khajiit are going to have the most powerful out-of-stealth attacks, and Redguard is going to have well-rounded offense with some of the best sustain. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope that I helped you guys out with a little bit of buildcraft. If you have any questions or comments for me, feel free to throw them in that comment section, guys. And as always, have a great time. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.